Business as Unusual is a thought-provoking podcast that explores the innovative strategies, disruptive ideas, and unconventional practices driving successful leaders and companies in the ever-evolving world of modern business. Subscribe, comment, and share for weekly inspiration with our host, Aicila.
Welcome to another episode of Business as Unusual. Today, we dive into the inspiring story of Jaime Araujo, a Napa Valley vintner with a passion for using wine as a catalyst for community and social change. Jaime shares how her unconventional approach, shaped by time spent abroad and a deep commitment to doing business differently, has turned her winery, Trois Noix, into a Certified B Corp and a force for good in the industry. In this episode, you'll discover how Jaime challenges old norms, why being authentic matters more than ever to today's wine drinkers, and how leadership and mentorship are reshaping the future of Napa Valley. If you're curious about how business and social impact can blend seamlessly, or just want to hear what makes a wine company truly stand out, you won't want to miss this conversation. Welcome to Business as Unusual. Today I'm talking with Jaime Araujo. Jaime's family has been making world-class wines in Napa Valley for over 25 years, and for most of those years, Jaime was actually living abroad in Europe. If you want to know all the juicy details, make sure to ask her if you meet her. Upon returning to Napa Valley to become a vintner, Jaime wanted to create a wine that would reflect her personal journey and what she loved most about wine, the people, and the sense of community. The name is Trois Noix, which means three nuts, and is an homage to our founder's love of France and her commitment to using wine as a catalyst for social change. Welcome to the show, Jaime.
Thank you so much for having me, Aicila.
I am really delighted to have you here today. I had the pleasure of tasting some of your wine, and it is delicious. I love hearing, and then I learned more about it from your colleague, and was just excited to have you come on and talk about what you're up to.
Yeah, we're busy. It's a lot to do.
Can you share the story of your vision a little bit of how and why you created this business? I know you're doing a lot of things, like you're a certified B Corp, and you have some ways that you work in community that it seems to me might be a little bit different and interesting to people.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, the first thing I will say is that it's super easy to have a vision in retrospect. There are a lot of things that just happen. There are a lot of things that you just do on the fly, or at least I do. I do a lot on the fly. And when you look back on it, it's like, oh, this makes perfect sense. And it's this beautiful through line that we can look at. But I wouldn't give myself as much credit as that to say that it was a whole Svengali thought up in advance.
I think they call that having good instincts, and
we'll go with that.
Go with that.
That's fair. No, and I will say that I think one of the huge bits of Trois Noix that's always stuck out to me is the fact that whether you want to call it instincts or kismet or serendipity, I've always had an enormous amount of luck in the colleagues, relationships, partnerships, and opportunities that sort of have come my way. So I think that's a huge piece of how Trois Noix has developed. And yeah, I mean, beware the side hustle would be my advice. Trois Noix originally started out as a little tiny thing with 300 cases that was just going to be like something to play around with. And I was very interested in ideas about just doing business differently, running business as a force for good, particularly in terms of community and my community here in Napa and then farther afield. But I didn't really have any grand plan. And then little by little, I got introduced to B Corp. I got introduced to other partners, vineyard growers, people in the industry. And started to kind of just do things, what I now realize is my way, which wasn't necessarily standard Napa practice at the time.
Something you and I talked about briefly last week was you likened yourself to being the foam roller of wine.
Yes.
Which I thought that was a delightful metaphor. Can you maybe talk a little about what that means to you?
Yeah. And, it just kind of occurred to me because I do very often have conversations about difficult topics in the wine industry, whether that is how we present ourselves, whether that is how we deal with our people, whether that is talking about social and environmental justice, whether that's talking about women in the industry, whatever it is. I can see sometimes when I'm talking to people that it's a little crunchy. It's just and it is good. Like it eventually gets those knots out, but you have to go through the crunchy bits. And that's why I was sort of saying, yeah, I guess I'm like the foam roller of Napa Valley wine. Just kind of trying to get the knots out of the fascia and really, because I think all the basics are there. All the really good things are absolutely here. It's just that there are some ways in which, and we're not unique. The patriarchy is everywhere, right?
Yes, it is.
It's not special to wine or to Napa, but I think there are a lot of ways in which nobody's asked these questions and the people in power haven't been interested in these questions. Yeah. And I come at it just myself, which is honest and pretty much straight to the point and asking questions that I think need to be asked.
Can you share a little bit about what a B Corp is? Just for folks that are listening.
Oh my gosh.
That might never
Absolutely,
have
100%. We could turn this into a B Corp podcast in a heartbeat because it's like my favorite thing to talk about.
We'll try to keep it mostly on you, but I think it might be helpful.
No, for sure. So B Corp is a fabulous certification. It's actually not industry specific. So any company can become a B Corp. And it's not geography specific. So it's actually an international certification. And basically what it does is it looks at your business on a 360. So everything from the governance of the company to the way you treat your employees, your vendors, your partners, your consumers, the environment, all of these things. And it gives you a certain score for all of these questions that you answer. And then if you get above a certain score, then you can apply to be audited. And eventually, if you can prove that all the answers that you gave were correct, you can actually get certified and join this incredible community, which is really about running business as a force for good in the community. I will say that's the standards that have been in play up until now. And we're actually rolling out brand new standards, which is super, super exciting, because one of the things that B Corp has always been very sort of in support of is progress, not perfection, right? We're all trying to do a little bit better every day. And that means that we're never perfect. We always have room for improvement. We always have room for growth. And I think they've realized that after a certain number of years, there are ways in which, potentially somebody who wasn't coming at it in good faith could gamify the system. And what they are very vigilant about is to avoid people being able to use a certification for any kind of like greenwashing or whatever. So they're doing some really wonderful new certifications and new standards that just help to avoid those loopholes and really double down on the commitments that you make as a B corporation, which are important and are real.
Yeah, that sounds wise. It's always tricky to find that balance between a checkbox and a burden in terms of evaluating what the process is. So,
yeah. Well, and I will say too, I think that companies that come into it with the right mindset and for the right reason won't find it any more difficult. If you were coming in and thinking like, I can like slide under the radar, then it's going to be tricky for you. But it's also really important for consumers, right? It's important that when they see the B, that they realize like, oh, okay, I can trust that this company has done at least this baseline of stuff. Right. I can trust that they are actually putting their money where their mouth is, kind of thing. And I think that's particularly in today's market, as a consumer, I find that really important.
Right.
Because it's just so hard. You find things and you're like, oh, I think they're doing a great job. And then it's like, oh my God, no, they're doing terrible things. It's important to be able to spend our money wisely.
Right. Well, one of the things you talked about is that wine is changing consumer generations. Do you feel like there's some interest in appealing to that new generation through updating how you, not your branding, but also how you do business? Do you think that there's a business advantage to that?
I do, absolutely. So this is kind of a multi-layered question, but basically we've been working with a changing consumer generation for probably the last 10 years, honestly.
Okay.
So a lot of the very high-end Napa wines from like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, early 2000s were supported in large part by sort of boomer aged wine collectors who were predominantly male, almost exclusively white. They spent an insane amount of money on our wines, which is amazing, and really built high-end Napa Cabernet especially into the thing it is today. I mean, they are really wholeheartedly responsible for that. As they are kind of aging out or like not buying so much because their cellars are full and all of that, all of a sudden it's like, okay, hang on, we've got these like Gen X, millennial, and even now like older Gen Z clients who don't buy wine the same way, who are not interested in scores and things like that for the most part, who are not interested in finding 3 wineries that they love, getting on the mailing list and just buying that and building out huge verticals and all this stuff. They are interested in, what are you doing? How are you doing it? I want to experiment. I want a mixed case. I want to buy from you this year and somebody else next year. And they're buying less, right? They're drinking less in general. So I think they're drinking better, but they're drinking less. So it is, I think it's super important for us. And, you know, they're asking serious questions and they can tell if you're bullshitting. I've got, well, I mean, they're a little young. They're not exactly our target consumer yet, but I have 2 teenagers and their bullshit meter is extremely effective. Like they can tell these, we're talking about like generations that have been raised on internet propaganda, marketing, and, you know, they're super, super savvy and they're very jaded and pretty distrustful and with, you know, understandably, and pretty quick to say enough as well. So I think it's definitely behooves us to be as transparent as we can be and to do the best. And we're doing really a lot of the right things already. That's the thing that's great, is like, it's actually not like we have to do things in a totally different way. Napa has been a leader in terms of, again, now regenerative viticulture. We have been absolutely a leader in terms of the way we manage our vineyard teams and making sure that people are being paid a fair wage, making sure that people have healthcare, making sure that all of those things are in place for the people who work in our community. One of the reasons that we can have this transparency and have this authenticity and do all these things is that we have the generations that have gone before us who absolutely worked tooth and nail to build the reputation of Napa and to insist over and over again that Napa could compete on the world stage. It made the wines that were just as good as Bordeaux or Burgundy or Tuscany or wherever. So I think that at the same time, they really built something that was very much about aspiration. So they built out this image of Napa as this sort of magical, idyllic, aspirational place, which was very effective at the time. But I think we've become a little bit of victim of our own success. And there are a lot of people, particularly younger people, who are saying, oh, well, you know, it's this place that I don't belong in. It's a place that is too aspirational. That's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in something that's real. So I think that we are able to be real because they built that aspirational model before. Because we have that confidence now, because we have that reputation now, we can kind of relax into actually being ourselves. And I think that's something that a lot of consumers, we find anyway at Trois Noix, are very, really receptive to and appreciate enormously, because nobody's perfect. We all know this.
Mm-hmm. I'm definitely not. I'm on the list of imperfect here. I'm curious about what about you? There's many people making wine, and you had, this was sort of it sounds like initially not even a focus. What was it that shifted that for you? When did you decide this is where I'm going to put the effort, and this is my inspiration for that?
Yeah. I mean, I think part of it, the momentum just sort of started, and I got swept up with it. I had the opportunity to bring on a Sauvignon Blanc, to bring on a Chardonnay. And I think really when the Chardonnay came on board, I realized that this was now a thing. It was a put up or shut up moment, right? Mm-hmm. That's when I really started to focus. And then, when we got our B Corp certification, our Napa Green certification, all of those things, that it was important not only for us, but also for our colleagues in those communities, that we were actually giving this the time and attention that it deserved. I think there's also a sense in which I've always felt very much like I have a responsibility to my community to do the best job I can. It's one of the reasons that I ended up as, this year's chair of the Napa Valley Vintners, right? Because I think it's super important to actually give back to the community, to actually participate in the way that the community runs. And so that's something that I am giving my time to this year. And I think, yeah, I would say in some ways it crept up on me, and in some ways it was like a lightning bolt. It just always made sense that this is what I was supposed to be doing.
It's neat to have found that too, sort of accidentally. What does success look like to you?
Success to me, I would say, looks like being able to enjoy what I do, at least most of every day, and being able to support and protect and encourage the teams of people that I work with.
How long have you been doing Trois Noix? Trois Noix.
I have been doing Trois Noix since the 2013 vintage. So it's like just over 10 years.
And is that a long or a short time in terms of wine making? Or,
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, families in Italy and France have been doing this for like 500 generations. So absolutely a drop in the bucket. I would say as far as Napa is concerned, if you make it past 5 years, if you make it past 10 years, I think but we're also in a really tricky spot in our industry right now. I mean, it's definitely a hugely challenging inflection point for us. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who stays, who survives, and who just decides to throw in the towel, because it's I have always said, and I'm not the only one, if you want to make money, do something else. Like literally do anything else, because wine is a terrible place to try and be like makes huge gobs of money.
Really?
Where money goes in the bottle. Like
Interesting.
It's a very high cost of goods product for the most part.
And is that the same with all liquors, or is it wine specifically?
No, absolutely not. I mean, vodka, like you have potatoes today, you have vodka tomorrow. Like, huzzah, let's go.
I feel like I need a bumper sticker that says that.
Done. Year is done.
Okay.
So I definitely, I think that there are ways in which you can absolutely make a lot of money in the alcohol industry, but wine is really not one of those. And honestly, you can look at any of the major conglomerates and any of the major distributors and whatever. They do not make their wine on their money on their wine portfolio. Absolutely not. They're making
Interesting.
so much more money on Fireball than they're making on Grand Cru anything.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, it's mostly cost of goods, specifically the grapes. It's not as much labor.
Yeah, I mean, cost of goods, labor goes into that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Land is super expensive. Grapes are very expensive. And now, because we have tariffs that are going here, there, and everywhere, our corks, our bottles,
Yeah.
everything is becoming that much more expensive. Our barrels, we have French oak barrels, and those are taking a huge hit. So it's definitely, yeah, it's a pretty labor intensive. And at Trois Noix as well, like we are tiny. We're like so small.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was always really important that as soon as I got a fully, employed team, that we had healthcare, that we had 401k, that we had all of these other benefits to support our team. So those things, yeah, they add to the cost of doing business, but they're also benefits that give back to the way of doing business, right?
Right.
So I do think that they're definitely worthwhile.
Yeah. I mean, we could have a whole podcast just on that. I feel like that's a part of why I love doing this is I get to talk to people that are really building businesses that think about the whole system and what is really functional. You maintain your car, maintain yourself, and maybe like help your people maintain themselves. Like it's a pretty practical approach when you think about it. But for some reason, it's become seen as, I don't know, extra. It's like no. We need to take care of things so that they can continue to thrive. Thriving is good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, wow. I think I would tell her, buckle up, because there's some huge surprises coming down the pike that you have not planned for at all. And, once you're buckled up, enjoy the ride, because you're going to get to do some really cool stuff. And you're going to be able to live in lots of different places and meet some amazing people and really live. And it's not what you have thought of it at all, but it's also going to be great.
That's honestly good advice at any age. I'm going to take that advice right now. What is something you're excited about in your business?
Wine-wise, very selfishly, super excited about, we have a Chenin Blanc coming out for the very first time this summer, commercialized this summer. So it's 24 vintage, and it is freakishly delicious and amazing. And it's a brand new wine for us. So we're very excited about that. So
Nice.
Watch this space.
Okay.
And if you want to make sure you're in the loop, then sign up for our newsletter and we'll make sure you get the information when it comes out into the market.
Nice.
So there's only a couple hundred cases. So
Ooh.
the other thing I would say that I'm excited about, more kind of industry wide. So like I said, I'm the chair of the Napa Vintners this year, which is the generic body that has the role of protecting, promoting, and enhancing Napa Valley wines. And I'm only the 7th female chair that they've had since 1944. And I am the first openly gay chair that they've ever had. So it's one of those things, like, I'm perfectly fine with it, but I was like, I don't know, let's see what the reaction's going to be to all of this. And the thing that I thought was so amazing, so we have an annual meeting at the beginning of the year, and I did a sort of address to the membership. And afterwards, we have a big lunch all together, and everybody has a chance to chat and talk, whatever. And the thing that really just blew my mind was the number of mainly younger women who came up to me and said, I'm so excited that you're the chair. This is so great. I can't wait. This is so amazing. It was really inspirational to see you there, and I'm really excited about this. And I think we underestimate how important it is to see people doing things and to be seen to be doing things. So it's something I'm very conscious of, making sure that I'm sort of wherever I am, I'm visible, I'm flying my flags, I'm doing my thing. And I will say that my answer to all of those women was, and guess what? Because I'm here, what are you doing for the vintners this year? What are you doing for this year? Because I can't do all of it by myself. I will stand up and and start the march, but I need people to help support everything that we're doing, because I can't, one pair of hands doesn't get it done. Right. So I think there are a lot of people who are just ready to do things differently, to have a different approach to things, and to feel like they're actually being heard. That makes me excited for the future, for sure.
That is really exciting. And I'm going to ask, so one of the things that I've noted in a lot of industries is part of why things don't change is there's a lack of, I want to say, leadership development or mentoring, because often people, if they're going to mentor someone, it's usually informal, and it's usually someone that reminds them of them, which means generally they have something in common. And if, as you noted earlier, primarily wine is white men running things, as has happened in a couple of industries in the world.
Just a few.
That's who they're likely to notice. And it's tricky sometimes, right, to explain that. It's we're not saying you're doing anything wrong. We're just saying you may not see some things. Are you seeing that change at all? Or how did you get this knowledge? Who mentored you? Or with these women coming in, do you feel like they have more opportunities to find that kind of support in the leadership development?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's a really important point, because, you can channel. I was just actually talking with my colleague before this call about the fact that there's the Jim Collins, who's a wonderful author. And one of his images is when you're a leader, you need all of the right people on your bus, but you also need them in the right seats. Mm. So if you have all the right seats all set up, but there's nobody getting on the bus, then you're not going to be successful. If you have all these people, these great people that you've built up and mentored and whatever, but the seats are all wrong, then you're not going to be successful. So I would say that Napa specifically, the CEO of the Napa Vintners, Linda Reef, has developed an amazing program. It's on its 5th cohort now, called the Napa Leadership Program. I was actually in cohort 1. And what it is really about building that next generation of leaders in the community, and specifically going after a diverse profile of people in the industry. And that's can be diversity in terms of function. So whether it's admin or winemakers or GMs and that kind of thing, but also in terms of men and women, also in terms of all these kinds of different things, and really having a cross section that is able to, first of all, develop relationships together, which is really important in a little community like ours, but also be able to access these different opportunities afterwards. And the other thing I would say specifically as far as women are concerned is there is a wonderful organization called Batonnage, and they've been working for, oh my gosh, pre-pandemic, so I guess 6 years now, on really developing women in the wine industry. And so they have sponsored a lot of different conferences, but they've also created a really wonderful mentorship program. And there's different tiers of mentorship and things. So people, women who are interested but not really sure can kind of get their feet wet in level 1, and then they can move on to more in-depth mentorship. And because it's not like I am choosing you to mentor, it's more of an organization that kind of sets people up with the different functions that they might want to occupy in the industry. You can get people who you would never have met normally. I've actually been a mentor twice now, and it's been really, really wonderful. It's a great organization.
That's amazing. So something that I think is true about you based on our conversations, and I'll ask it also, you seem like the kind of person who almost gets excited by a challenge. There's a lot going on right now that people could get really down about. And it's not like you haven't referenced it both when we did our pre-chat and today. And yet your attitude and approach seems to be more one of, let's take this on, let's solve this problem, let's move forward. And if that's true, which I think it is, but you can correct me, Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from? Because I think that's a great thing for people to be able to connect to right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily, well, no, I guess I do. Like it's
Yeah. You're just like, all right, here we go. Let's climb this Everest today.
Yeah.
It just seems like you've got a little bit of that going on, but you also don't seem overly.
There is, but it's not like a challenge for challenge's sake.
Right.
I would say I have a very keenly developed sense of justice that started at a very young age. And it's just always been something, when something's not right, it really bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
It really, really bothers me when something's unfair.
Yeah.
Not right, because that's leads you down to judgment and things like that. But really, when something is just is categorically unfair and unjust,
Mm-hmm.
that bothers the very core of my being. And I think it's important to, like I said, I have come from an incredible amount of privilege. I have an amazing amount of privilege in the industry and the community that I live in. So it's essential. It's not even like an option for me not to use my voice. That's the way this works for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just, that's our responsibility. That's our obligation. That's our part of being human. That's part of being in this community, is using our voices when we can, as, to support those people who don't necessarily have a voice, or who maybe are working on their voice, and also, by the way, to get out of the way of other people's voices too. This is just as important.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not always as good at that, but I am trying. I'm working on that. That's one of my jobs.
I appreciate you sharing your voice today with me. I so appreciate what you're up to, and I'm definitely going to check out what you've got going on. And I've always felt a little intimidated by the whole wine thing. I usually buy wine by the label. I'm not
Totally fine.
I'm just like, look at these pretty pictures. That feels good.
99% of people do. No, seriously, people generally, they come in to a wine purchase, and this is at any level. This is like people who know wine, who don't know wine. They have an idea in their head of how much money they want to spend, even if they don't realize it.
Okay.
They have a vague idea, either like red or white or rosé or sparkle, or, maybe a different country that they are thinking about, or maybe a region or a grape variety if they know that much. And then they go in to the wine shop or the supermarket or the online store, and they look at labels. And if maybe it's something they recognize, in which case, great. And maybe it's just something that's intriguing, or it looks like it should be good. Like it's absolutely across the board the way everybody picks their wine.
Well, that's very kind. I have some friends who actually know things, and whenever they serve me something, I'm always like, yeah, this is like several levels better than anything I've ever gotten myself. So I'm clear there's a whole knowledge factor that I lack. For folks that are listening, yes, and they want to know more, they want to follow you, they want to find out about your new wine being released, what's the best way for them to do that?
So online, you can go to our website, www.trois with an S, noix with an X, wine.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Trois Noix Wine, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. And then if you happen to be in Oregon in the end of June, you can come see us at the Queer Wine Fest on June 29th in McMinnville, Oregon. We're going to be pouring our wines there. And if you are on our mailing list, we always have a list of where I'm going to be in the world. So we always try and connect with people who love our wines. Whenever I'm traveling, I always send out a little note and say, look, we're going to be having a drink at this bar. Come on over and say hi. Just a nice way to be able to be in touch with folks, because, our consumers are our extended community, and we feel pretty strongly about that. So
that is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing what you're up to. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was really fun.
Next week on Business as Unusual, discover how optimizing your biological age, not just your mindset, can become your ultimate superpower for entrepreneurial success with longevity expert Ines Oliet. Thank you for tuning in to Business as Unusual. Remember, in this ever-evolving world of modern business, it's not about fitting in, it's about standing out. See you next time. Stay curious, stay innovative, and always keep it unusual. I hope you enjoy the show. I love making it. If you did enjoy it, consider hopping over to the review portion of the platform you listen on and letting other people know about it. Or share the episode or the entire show with a friend or subscribe to the show. Definitely reach out, get on my newsletter, follow me on social media, and let me know what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see in the future. While we love our guests, appearance on the Business as Unusual podcast or any Bicurean consulting production is for information purposes only and is not to be considered an endorsement of their business practices, or character. Please properly vet anyone you find through this podcast and generally before you do any business with them. Thank you for listening.